So welcome everyone. This is the fourth in a series of talks that I call Unexpected Encounters with Remarkable People. We've had some very interesting folks come through here in the last year. And of course, Alan is an old friend of ours and not particularly unexpected. We always enjoy when Alan comes around. A couple of things that I think about when I think about Alan, aside from him being incredibly handsome and charismatic, he's really articulate, he's intelligent, he has a wonderful worldview, and he's very inspiring to me. So we're really happy to have him here tonight. We have a donation box that Michelle has. There we go. Nick has that. Pass that around. Great. So we're almost set here. Do you need help, Alan?
Well, my phone just decided to get dysfunctional.
Here.
Oh, it's working.
Okay. All right.
It's working.
Okay, I'm going to push the button.
Let me put this on you also, just for the heck of it.
Leave it alone, Michelle. Screw it.
Good.
Well, I'm going to.
Just let it go. We've got the gentleman in the back.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Just let it be.
All right, but I'm going to tell you online if it works. And there you go.
So good. Is someone coming?
Yes. It's Maui, unfortunately.
It's working now?
It's on mine.
Okay, let me just
Forward it to you.
get the microphone in. We're good, Tom?
Good to go. Welcome, Alan.
To you, Madame, thank you for opening your home and your land and your heart to me. I feel blessed to be in your beautiful company and your divine husband, creative savant. Tom, thank you from my heart. To this blessed, unprecedented island on planet Earth, where I first came 51 years ago, with a tent on Baldwin, ended up in Kauai at Taylor's Camp, came back repeatedly till this very moment. Long history here. This is sort of galactic home, not second home. Heart home, right? I sound like I've done too many drugs, right? Been on Maui too long. And so thank you for opening up your island home to me. I'm a temporary guest, and I've come here out of deep, passionate choice the last year. Many of you know, some of you don't know. I'm going to only take a few minutes tonight and share some of the spontaneous moments that I'm feeling. I have been in deep, sacred silence for a long time. And you might hear that in my voice, it's challenging to use my vocal cords and my mind, and not my mind. I like using my mind and my heart more than ever now. And it's been the most challenging period for all of us in many ways the last couple of years, right? And this last year especially for me, which I don't draw myself as unique, and I'll share just a few things about it, has been one of the most challenging periods of my life and remains the most challenging period, not in a bad way, but certainly challenging. Now, with that said, I have a few things to share with you, and more to the point for me, which is a gift to me, should you feel like bestowing a gift on me, besides just simply being here. Being that I've been in retreat for so long, that I'm very eager, in a way, depending on what you say, to interact. There's something in the interaction for me that is beyond just relational. At this point, I would say it's intrinsically mystical. I have a deep, deep creative aesthetic regard for the space between us, the Ubuntufication of existence, if you know the word by South African Desmond Tutu, and on and on. I cannot be who I am without you. I become who I am through you. Your suffering is my suffering. Your dignity is my dignity. Ubuntu. And I've used the word erotic, not so much sexual. The erotification of shared space, which is what Tom, I'm deeply inspired by Tom's life as an artist, as a human, as a man of aesthetics. But for me, it's the interrelational. I make my life an expression of my heart, not only my art. So when I use the word the erotification of Ubuntu, to me, when I speak about art or aesthetics and creativity, are you hanging with me? Okay? We're good? I love things on walls. I like sculpture. I like naked bodies, clothed bodies. I like even looking at ruins. I spent a year in Yugoslavia during a genocide. You meet art there that is so outrageously traumatized that it's breathtaking to be in the company of a woman who's been gang raped because she was born a human. Radical. And she looks at you with incredible presence. And it's not the presence of having read Eckhart Tolle's book, Be Here Now. Well, that was Ram Dass, right? Then later he ripped it off from Ram Dass. But it's actually trauma. And she's eking out a beautiful word. I am so honored that you're in my company at such high risk. Ubuntu. To still care about interrelatedness and to respect the risk. Please take a seat, sit anywhere. Make yourself highly comfortable. We're in good formation here. Nice to see you all three. Take your time. You're not interrupting, you're complimenting. Nice to see you. Nice to see you, gentlemen. And so this is my way of segueing into why I love Michelle and why I love Tom, why I love studios, why I love art, why I love Dharma and meditation and human life. The Buddha summed it up in one phrase. People often ask me, having been a Buddhist monk for a short period of time and spent a lot of time, maybe you've been in the country of Myanmar or Burma. I spent the better part of 43 years in and out of that country. 6 books, 2 films, as you know. The woman there who's been so universally vilified, a very dear friend of mine, Aung San Suu Kyi, the Nobel laureate. We did a book together back in '95 called The Voice of Hope. Subsequently, in the last 10 years, I did 4 more books called Burma's Voices of Freedom. I bring it up because these people make living art out of human interrelatedness, even with an enemy. So I went beyond art as art, and how can you relate, not just in an artful, creative way, but bring high purpose, not godly purpose, but unique purpose to you. How do you make each encounter the most precious thing in your life? Today I released a book with the Reverend Bodhi B. Many of you know him. A heartful man, a very interesting man. A book called Facing Death, a conversation with Reverend Bodhi B. I have been diagnosed with a fatal heart disease. Many of you know that. It's fatal only because of my denial, doctors tell me. Only because of my overthinking of this radical surgery that is so debilitating even to think about, much less being on that fucking table for 12 hours with 10 people. Do you think you're going to Mars? And then the cognitive decline and the possibility of a heart attack. I'm squeamish, even over a cobby thorn in my foot walking on the beach. On and on and on. Why don't you save your life, save your life, get on that table, save your life. And it's like, whoa, easy to say, right? Very easy to say. And so I'm in this condition that many people go like, how do you relate? How do you deal with the stress, the anxiety of knowing, as the doctors just said last week in LA when I was there, you will die any second. I don't mean to pornographize your life tonight, but it's like, okay, great, bring it on. You know, is there anything new about that? I bring it up in relationship to my 50 years of knowing Dharma life, meditative life. It all comes back for me. I'm a dad, a single dad. It's very rare that I spend time with my daughter, but when I do, and I was just with her, unthinkable presence, right? And so at this day and time, art for me is the quality of presence. Not just the aesthetic of presence alone, meaningful presence, right? Look at the last couple of years. We've been so challenged on what is true. Should I speak up? How should I comply? Look at the divide in our lives, right? Fair enough. It's been said a lot, but it's not been said enough. Truth has been so bastardized and people have been so canceled and censored. We all know that. But the quality of interactive, this eroticized Ubuntu, the meaning, I bring it up, and I'm halfway through before we open it up to a dialogue. People ask me, how do you feel? I said, I've never been more alive and available, yes, vulnerable. More open-hearted, yes, uncertain. To the interactive gift of being a human while I'm still breathing, walking, talking. I have no pain. It's kind of all existential. But the quality of someone's presence. I'm so down with the children. I wrote a children's book recently called Tonight I Met a Deva, an Angel of Love. It was based on a true story. A Deva in the Buddhist tradition is a deity, an angel. And I wrote it for my daughter. I wrote it for the children. I wrote it for the children in this man's heart that's still there, that will be reborn as a child. The child in all of us, the child that's not yet born, who will inherit this world. I've lived long enough. 71 is long enough. Yes, I hope to live longer, but I don't really feel that attached to it. But there will be inheritors to this planet, right? Who will walk after us? What will they inherit? So when people ask me about my condition, about Dharma, about meditation, about art, meaningful presence that's in consideration of the children. I like that kind of art. I like that kind of human being that really looks at me and says, you know, you and I can do something to preserve the sanctity of life for the unborn, for the young, the youth. Am I too preaching here? I just need to get this off my chest because I might not live tomorrow. You know, that kind of thing. But people often, sidetrack this. People often ask, how does it feel? And I just, screw it. I don't really care. But it's those people, those rare few people, those women who really empower the man and the man who empowers himself to feel, no cliche intended, really hyper uber divine what? The feminine, right? We got it all wrong. To me, I've been reduced and returned to primordial femininity. Radical vulnerability. It's not like male, female, masculine, feminine. That's an outdated paradigm. Yeah. It's an original course of action. The ultimate eternal womb of being. I've been calling for it since I've been on the stage here back in 2001 at the MAC. And although they're negotiating with me now to come back in October, it's how real can you be with meaning that cares about the future of life? And that artistry is not religious, it's not spiritual. It's so radically beautiful to see a gentleman like Tom, and I don't say this very often because I rarely see Tom. But he knows I deeply admire him. Why? I admire the women and the men in the world who live artistically, but with deep, deep meaning. Please sit anywhere you want. There's no need to wander. Just please sit, please, please. Take your time. Feel at home.
Thank you, Alan.
Beautiful. Thank you for coming. But quality of those people who don't need to have someone applaud when they're truthfully open, don't need to conform particularly, they're rebellious by the function of their own integrity, they're willing to speak the truth rather than being vilified. Who cares, right? And they're like these divine mothers, speaking as a man from the outside, that embraces the difference. And I'm going to conclude with this. You know, my friend Aung San Suu Kyi, the Nobel laureate, the state councilor of Burma, she's one of many. There are 13,627 prisoners of conscience in Burma. I spent 12 years of my life, 77 trips to Burma, interviewing 365 political prisoners, not because of my need, but bringing the voice of conscience. Please sit anywhere, floor, tables, recline, fly, sofa. Please make yourself at home quickly. Any chair is a good one. Take your time. Please, please, please. There we go. We're getting closer to the chair. Thank you for coming out, Starheart. I bring up political prisoners because they are the most rad people I know, because they stood up for their beliefs. And how many times in my interviews with these women and men and children, why did you do what you did? Freedom was more important than fear. And they weren't fearless. They learned to coexist with fear. I feel more frightened today than ever in my life. And you know, it hurts, but it's real. I've learned to accept complexity more so than the bravado of idealism as a monk seeking enlightenment. The present is elongated. It's not just here or now. Compassion is far-reaching. It's about tomorrow, about the life that's yet come. It's not just about Alan being mindful of his thoughts and his emotions in a monastery or on Maui or in a retreat. It's the feminine, the divinely important feminine. So a lot of things I've said tonight, and I don't want to get too preachy about it. I've been irreverent for a long time. The MAC, I said, they're going to have me back on the stage in October if I'm still walking. They're negotiating whether or not what I'll say will be acceptable. Yeah, even the president's getting involved, bless his heart. The tentative title is called Raw War. It's a cinematic spoken word mandala of good and evil with a highly irreverent tone to it. No hostages. I might not ever live again after October 15th. But it's going to be filmed for part of a documentary feature film that I'm doing everything I possibly can to stay alive to create. If I don't have moments of hope in the future, it's over for me. I don't want to get out of bed. I want to cry. I want to take the drugs that have been given to me by hospice here to end my life. People ask me, isn't being present really the role of facing death? I say, fucking no, man. I want to know that I'm going to see you tomorrow. I don't want to just tell you I love you right now. I want to know that I'm going to see my daughter again. That gives me hope, right? Moments of love in the future. Get out of the moment. I mean that so seriously. Get out of the moment and stretch that moment to embrace the woman, the womb, 9 months of a child giving birth to eternity, right? Not just now. That is so fucking narcissistic, you can't get over it. And it works as a cult when you applaud each other because you're so still in that mindfulness moment. And you've lost your thinking process and you basically become a high-end cultist brokering nonsense. And you applaud each other in your propaganda. That's not spiritually incorrect. That's today honest among anyone who's younger than 36. They want nothing to do with me unless I speak this way, right? This is post-psychedelic era. So by way of saying, lots of things to talk about. Political prisoners really are amazing. They're not prisoners at all. I've never seen, some of the times, not always, happier people in my life who feel sorry for someone outside of that position. We were successful enough to be arrested and given long-term sentences. We pissed them off so well. I mean, that's pretty amazing. When you look at A Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela, one of those sacred chapters where he and the RNC turned towards selective non-civilian violence, and they were arrested, and when the sentence was given life, they danced and sung and chanted. Why? We knew that we were a threat to the apartheid machine. Where is that spirit today? Where is it? I'm not asking you to rise up. I'm saying rise up. Rise up in the littlest of ways. And I'll close with this and open it up to you and us talking, for all of us, and for those who are watching and listening. The preciousness, if I think about what's being left behind, is not that I will live well enough, but it's the quality of intimate interaction with the person, the people that are there. And it doesn't necessarily translate that because you are good at yoga, good at meditation, that you dose regularly, that you're in psychotherapy, that you're married, that you're wealthy, that your presence is that high a quality. It takes a woman, generally speaking, to awaken the intimacies of nuance in the psyche of both women and men. And I say this as a man who's not dying but living, and I've been saying it for decades, and I think this is the rub here at the MAC. I've been calling for the end of men in political office for decades. For me personally, if there's a message I would like to have in the world, not just mandatory high-dose use of psychedelics if you run for the Senate or the Congress or president. That's not original, but mandatory use. Second mandatory, you go to war zones and places where ordnance and the defense industry kills people with impunity, and you see someone who's been fried by a missile. Mr. Biden, you go there to Yemen, to Syria, to Ukraine, not in a white suit. You, Miss Pelosi, go to those places and you see that girl who's incinerated by the defense contract that we just gave $40 billion to. You see what those fucking weapons do. Then you have the right to talk. Walk your walk before you talk. Showing up to me as a political prisoner, what further evidence do you need for integrity in moral action? Then you got the war machine today and the media machine that's so adept. It's a whole series of talks I could give, and I wish I could, on the nature of mind control. I look at people that are just hypnotized with their spirituality, being so present with me, but I could predict what they're going to say. No offense to anyone in the room. They're not, but if you know what I mean, besides the namaste, the cursory namaste, don't namaste my ass, just pay my visa bill and shut the fuck up. You know, show up on a generous level, but I'm not the God in you because you're not paying my bill. I know it's somewhat humorous, but hey, cliche, propaganda, mind control. Right now, we're in a mass hypnosis moment. I cannot hear it enough, loud enough, to crack the coma of conformity to information that's untrue. I had someone recently go off on me because I dare even say that I've researched Donald Trump as well as any psychiatrist in the last 10 years. I didn't say anything more than that. You, like Mr. Donald, red, orange hair evil man, the misogynist, the sicko, I didn't say that. I said I wrote a novel called Extinction Xrated in which he's included, and I had to do a deep dive on who he is as a person. I said a lot of information about the gentleman is propaganda. Yes, he's an asshole. No problem. Yes, he's a narcissist. Yes, he grabs vagina. Yes, yes. But the guy is not a merciless sociopathic murderer. Okay? I'll go tooth and nail with you on that. With the forever war Democrats. Okay? No offense to all of you now. I know it's going to get your fur up. But I am not comfortable with killing. Political prisoners who stand in feminine-inspired dialogue over violence, Burma. Where is the voice of discussion today? Where is freedom of speech, the First fucking Amendment? Why can't we differ and still love each other and hug, make love? Where did it go? Co-opted propaganda. So you can't speak today about truth and freedom and human rights unless there's a deep dive into the nature of mind control. Mass hypnosis is not enough. That's too cliche and over for. I've studied totalitarianism. Coercion of good minds to do things against their conscience, yes. And it's all over this island, it's all over Hawaii, it's all over America, it's all over the world, and it's spreading like a tsunami of evil. And I think we need to find that deep prisoner of moral conscience in our soul and make that a priority along with being present spiritually, morally, and socially with everyone that we meet. A renaissance, a resurrection of radical truth that isn't invasive, but not to cower for fear of being misunderstood or vilified or censored. A resurrection of the courage to speak truth. And I think that comes back to this issue of being present with each other and not needing to force agreement. And that's sort of a big message for me. You can see I go a little bit vulnerable with that. Because I'm sensitive like you. I could easily be rejected the way that someone looks at me. Not a problem to feel shame, trauma, and insecurity simply by someone standing up and walking out. You know, there's a lot of ways in which we shame each other. And I would just only encourage you, not that you need encouragement, that there's a time in history that our children will look back and really ask us, who were we? What did we do? What didn't we do? Okay? I'll end with this story. Of all people in my life, who's one of my dearest friends, he was the son of a dictator in Burma, the general of the army. I was a monk for several years in Burma, and there was a big trail of people, a big carcade of people coming to the monastery. And after a couple of days, when he was settled in, he was introduced to me as the former general who had just been released from 6 years of prison by his dictatorial father for fear of a coup d'etat. And one day they were playing golf, and it was surrounded by soldiers, and that was the last he saw of freedom for 6 years, alone in a prison cell without anything. Upon release, he was brought to the monastery not to outrage the dictator. He and I became very good friends, cutting to the chase. He introduced me to the psychology of totalitarianism. I had no idea of that. I was well educated. I went to the University of Virginia. I wanted to be a lawyer. I even wanted to be a president at some time. You would have voted for me, wouldn't you, if I was running against Trump?
As long as you didn't say the F word.
Oh my God. I could use the N word, nuclear war. I could use the bioweapon word. I could use the C word, COVID. There's so many words that we could use that are just not about that. Anyway, so U Tin U talked to me about the psychology of dictatorship and totalitarianism. Next thing you know, he's meeting Aung San Suu Kyi, and together they form a political party based upon the divine feminine principle that we refuse to use violence in speech, in thought, in action to confront dictatorship and weapons. She still stands on that in a prison cell, and she's been universally vilified. One of the great countries in the world. And people, they find fault with her because she didn't do this. Not only one of us, talk about walking a talk, 17 years, 19 years in confinement. Anyway, to make a long story short, when he was released from his final trip, and when I met him again, 19 years in solitary, along with what he had done, I asked him, how do you make it through 19 years of solitary? He looked at me, just like we look when we're really, really in love, in those rare moments of showing up with whom you're with. And he grabbed my hand, and they're very physical in Burma, men as well. He said, Alan, it is not easy. And then he closed his eyes, and I feared that I'd re-traumatized him some way. And he said, Alan, he spent an hour, but I'll spend 2 minutes. In a prison cell, when you're alone without a blanket and a pot to pee in a mosquito net and not running water, it gets really tough at times. But we trained as a monk, remember, on how to be present and mindful with struggle and not to further shame ourselves based on this, but to be mindful of it, to release anger, to release worry, to release doubt. And even though I did that repeatedly, still there were times when it was really, really hard. I can't imagine sleeping one night without a pillow or a blanket or a mosquito net. 19 years by the thousands of people there at this very moment. And then he said, the food is so wretched, even the dogs wouldn't eat it. However, the guards who guarded us at the prison were also impoverished, poor, and often hungry. And rather than complaining or struggling as a victim about the quality of the food, this has all been documented, by the way, on film and books, I decided to not eat a third meal and give it to my guards. Reflecting on the generosity nourished me more than the absence of the food being hungry. Just think of that as a spiritual teaching. The nourishment inherent in giving. Michelle and Tom have gifted me with a temporary temple. You know what that means to someone who's not in a home? You might think of it as normal. It is absolutely normal for these two generous souls to do that. But as a recipient in a vulnerable place, contemplating complex issues, and I've lived in refugee camps. When I was in Zagreb, 300,000 people lived on the street in the dead of winter, many of them who were affluent psychiatrists, yoga teachers, philosophers, 7 families in our well, outside of our flat. You know what it means to give something to someone when they look at you and go, thank you for keeping me alive. And he said, giving that food was everything. They smuggled in a Bible. I was never really knowledgeable of Jesus. Forgive those, for they know not what they do. The justification of righteousness versus humility and understanding a deeper ignorance in all of us, right? I began to relax even a deeper victimhood. Even the man who imprisoned me, my beloved father dictator, I relaxed that little part in me and said, you know, from infinite conditions, this man has been sculpted by forces against his own control. His mother and father, his grandparents, the 800 billion people that lived before us. The planet of life that we're inherently embedded in, where did it begin? He said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Deep implications to that, again coming back to the feminine-inspired beauty of dialogue over destruction. We're at the brink of global destruction. Whether you know it or not, I think we're very, very close to the precipice. if it doesn't take you and me and all of us to really stand up to quality of presence with these values, not to preach, but to feel together into a new way of being. And then he said to me, he really squeezed my hand. He said, when it really got really tough, Alan, I had memories in my heart of love. Okay? And I would think about my wife, not having seen her for nearly 2 decades. You'd rather die than to think of that. And I would bring a memory of her, her perfume, her eyes, her lips. Think about that. This is so trans-tantra, so human. People ask, how do you cope with a diagnosis that you could die at any second, just like all of us, right? Quality of presence, right? Can we get more passionate about the quality of presence? These people give us a message of hope in the nuance of what they bring to it. I bring into memory a memory of love, he said. He's got his eyes closed. And then he opened up his eyes and he said, what really got me through the most intimate, difficult times was not the memory alone. And this is his words, this is not mine. I'm paraphrasing his wisdom. Was taking the memory and translating memory on a psychedelic, intimate level from a cognitive image, thought, emotion into present time nutrient to feel the past as the present, as human warmth, he said. He said, the feeling human warmth is what got me through the hardest of hard times in prison for 19 years in solitary. Human touch. And I end here and I ask you, can we play such intimate, high stakes with our love with each other that we get so close to the human heart together, the eroticized Ubuntu together, and that the exchange between us, the exchange between each other and the community, could it be said enough, the power of warmth, love, and I dare say what I long for the most, actually, which it's so strange that we've been psychically, socially distanced. And I tell myself, even you, I want to hug, but I don't fear that I won't get on a plane to see my daughter again. Is this the power of human touch? Human touch. And so from my heart to yours, thank you for letting me share openly. Back to you and us, if there are things that you would like to discuss or talk about or ask. I don't have many boundaries, at least until I recognize them. And then I usually overcompensate and share more than you ask. And so if there are questions or things that you would like to talk about, don't hesitate to include me in your question, and I'll give you my very best, whatever it may be. Any aspect of life, feeling, emotions, diagnoses, political issues. Summer, please take your time.
I just want to correct this sentiment that you put forth in your talk. There's a very specific energetic to the sentiment that you're expressing. You have a visceral understanding of it that a lot of us don't. A somatic understanding of it that a lot of us don't. So I was compelled to be in that energetic for a minute more, to really honor what that means for every single one of us every single day. And with that, make it known that if those people on Maui want to do the kind of work that monks do, that political prisoners do, we have that work here every single day. Every single day. And it's right there. And we're walking past it.
Mm.
So if anybody wants to get involved with putting into action one's own spiritual activism activism, particularly if they're in an age group where getting arrested won't compromise their potential viability for the rest of their lives, for example. There's a lot of attacks on free speech and human dignity happening on Maui, and it's at ground zero. It's serious. And I've been looking for people to help. And so I would love to really honor Alan's desire to move that Kuleana forward, the Kuleana of compassion.
Beautiful.
And just honor that for you and for that, please.
Thank you, Summer. Please feel free to stay after for a little bit of time and commune and talk to Summer Star and her partner Josh in any way that might be supportive to what Summer is bringing up. Thank you. Thank you for seeing that and saying that.
Speaking of stories, I don't know if I've ever heard how you actually ever ended up the first time you went to Burma, or why you even got there. And I don't know if anybody else
Should I?
has heard the story, but I'd love to hear it.
Okay, sure. I'd be honored to share that in semi-brief. I've written about it extensively in a book called Instinct for Freedom, Burma, the Next Killing Fields, and more recently this radical satirical novel that I don't recommend that you read, called Extinction Xrated. In a nutshell, I was so imprisoned in my mind and in Western culture by the capitalistic, patriarchal idiocy of a war machine that people were so fucking complicit with that they wanted to vote kill and call it freedom. And that propaganda drove me insane. I couldn't articulate it that clearly, but my psychedelics, my meditation, my sensitivity led me towards opiate use. I won't use the word addiction. It was not a coping device, it was a necessity, because I was sensitive and clear about not wanting to participate in a killing machine called the United States of America. You know, am I an idealist? No. But I've been up close through my adventure to see dead bodies, decapitated heads, many women who've been violated by men and violence. And I'm more against violence than ever. Would I kill? Absolutely. Am I a pacifist? No. Someone screws with my daughter, I'll take your hand first off and then your neck. Yeah. So it's all skillful appropriateness. But if I had my way, I would be in Biden and Trump and Obama and our American government's head and say, stop, there's a thing called dialogue over justified murder. And go to any length imaginable to empower. I hate you so fucking much. Yes, I want to kill you, but I'm not. Rave on, mad woman. Rave on, madman. Restrain the violence. Learn the art. So I left America totally in a crazed state of cocaine, opioid, alcohol, sex, nicotine, art. I was consumed with art in Hollywood Hills, painting, and feeling like there were only gestalts of my own anguish, and I had no place to turn. And I had read books on meditation before, and so I said, fuck, man, and I invited the monk who I had met in Burma in '77 to come to Los Angeles since it was a dictatorship and you couldn't get into the country. He came, I was so inspired. At the end of it, I said, you know, I'm going to chance it. He said, if you want to give it a go, we'll give it a go with you. No one's been given a visa in nearly 20 years, more than diplomats for 6 days. But if you ordained as a monk in New York and showed your good intent, we'll bring you back with us and try our best to appeal to the fucking man who imprisoned one of my dear friends, U Tinu, the dictator. So I was doing cocaine all the way until my head was shaven. And alcohol until the 5 minutes before I was ordained, and my last cigarette. And I shaved my head in rage and tears, Michelle, that I was going to either die or this was my exit. This was my rehab. This was my existential chariot. This was my stairway to some form of heaven. Meditation represented freedom from this complexity called American culture. I had no idea what would happen there. I went back, they appealed on day 6, literally with only hours left on my visa. They granted me a 3-month extension, the very man who imprisoned my friend, the man who imprisoned Aung San Suu Kyi. And I stayed, and they kept renewing my visa. And I never felt more at home, although I switched opioid from pharmaceutical-style opioids. I hope this is not too much information. But I'm proud of the things that I've done. I don't know about you. And I've been more addicted to more things simultaneously than anyone I've ever met. And I'm absolutely free, even though hospice here demands that I use drugs, and they can't believe that I don't want them, except the good ones that they don't have. I've got to go to the people here that do it underground. So I got into opium in a monastery and cigars. I've written about this. And it was the only way that you could come down off of I was never complete without the woman. I'm not sure that I am today. Imagine at 27, you just have no more intimate contact with, if you're heterosexual, with the opposite sex. There's no more self-pleasuring. There's no masturbation. There's no food after 12 noon. There's no talking. There's 8 hours of sitting meditation, 8 hours of 1-hour walking meditation. There are no blankets. There are no hard pillows. There are no mosquito nets. And this is my choice to come from a very nice home in Hollywood Hills. And so I really had a moment of doubt that I'd done the wrong thing. But going back to America was worse than the idea of facing the best kept secret of all. I know it sounds cliched, is my own naked, unadulterated self in the context of a sacred dignity called a holy temple, where the only thing asked of me was to abide by the rules of conduct, and we'll hold you in this sacred space for you to come unglued. And the nuns and monks allowed me to become unglued. And meditation was the innocent navigation of finally, for the first time in my life, taking responsibility. I'm a professional blamer. Always someone else who's wrong, except in those rare times when I wanted something from her. And then I would make amends and just, oh no, I'm so sorry. But there in the monastery, you learn radical accountability, no time off, no posture, no state unworthy of being mindful of, especially greed, anger, and delusion. And for the first time, you are the sole architect of your presence. We're here to hold that space, and that's a beautiful thing. I've often said to people, if you want to give yourself a gift, do a meditation retreat with a very sacred woman or a man temporarily. If you want, I'm doing one in Bali, July 22nd, offered freely. I've stopped charging many years ago for anything that I do. And you're welcome to come. It'll be upline soon. But to just simply sit, abide, eat, coexist together, and feel. Meditation is the high art of feeling without running, which is not an easy thing to do. Even when you're a nun or monk, it's easy to hide. It's easy to hide as a meditator. It's easy to hide in your own idea of insight. How many people write guides to enlightenment to hide their inadequacy sexually and their fetish for money? No offense to those books, but you're offensive to yourself by thinking you're enlightened. That's all. It's a pathology that people collude with because they like to ideal delusion. But to be free of greed, anger, and delusion, what's your model of enlightenment? The ability to count loot when you're not looking? I mean, really, bestsellers, ranking on Amazon, stillness, hello. Hummingbirds can be still at 100,000 miles a minute. So you got to really ask yourself, the meditation brought me there. What kept me there, Michelle, to end? It's hard work to look at yourself, as you know. But to not have distractions, even though you can have a lot of distractions, but it's not easy to have a distraction as a monk or nun. You can't just go to Whole Foods and buy good food or make love or whatever. You can't watch Netflix. You can't do any of that. But the relationships that I developed there were immeasurable. I'm intense, it's obvious. But those people didn't see it as a hardship. They got down with it. Increase the intensity, dude, because it's going to get even more intense, more passionate. And I got celebrated for the first time. It was like, as you sensitize, this Ubuntufication process, it's like, I want to love the things in you that you've not honored in yourself. So meditation and elegant relationship are inseparable. Monasteries are temples of silence, connection, and wise interrelatedness. And I was blessed to have beautiful men and women in the monastery that kept me there. It wasn't the meditation. So then I was thrown out of the country by the dictator that imprisoned my friend 4 times. The final time, I was brokenhearted. It was my family. And I came back to the West, and it was even more difficult than leaving. And I had a moment of glory for about a year, going from retreat to retreat, many of them on Maui, many of you have attended. And then I became enamored with what I call the double life. And I was pretty hip to begin to see that what I was saying and how I was living were incongruent. And I had friends near me that didn't collude particularly, and I began to have a self-reflection that, Alan, you're living to get out of the retreat that you just led, to live a life different than you're advocating to the people who were there. And I'm going like, why not? Until I began to do the triple life. Then I began to believe my own lie, until I began to do MDMA therapy with a very renowned therapist. And then in the defenselessness of this inner awakening, I began to see my own collusion with my own self-deception. And people ask often, what is the greatest gift you can give yourself? Learn how you deny and learn how you deceive yourself, and there you'll find something that you've been hiding that's beautiful. And so, pardon me?
Can you say that again?
Look at how you deny things in yourself, and look at how you could deceive things in yourself. Begin to slowly uncloak from the shame of that hiding and find some of the most beautiful aspects of your being. And that's a very rare thing. Rather than uncovering shadow, you're walking into the light. And that's something we've gotten, I think, a little bit wrong. And it's more than just vulnerability. It's more of calculated, contrived arrogance, cloaked under, no offense to this need to come back to, what would be a way to talk about it? The pomposity of positivism. You see a lot of people addicted to, it's just your shit. There's no real accountability to you being an asshole. And the disguises of narcissism today are so rampant, it makes Vishnu look like an ordinary kind of Waldorf student in relationship to the new, more hidden forms of narcissism and arrogance, cloaked under the guise of wakefulness, stillness, happiness, nimbleness, on and on and on, tattoos. And so I was thrown out, and I descended into a quadruple life, and eventually I had the good sense at that point to cease and desist from further so-called teaching. I never got involved in human life to be a teacher. And so this was like 1986 that I stopped. And then I got a phone call just the other day too, but my friend called me from Burma in 1988. You may remember August 8, 88, when Burma's students said enough of this gentleman who imprisoned my friend and threw me out. And 1 million people took to the street in defiance of, radical, toxic patriarchy. And I might add that Burma is a victim of white imperialism. 135 years of British genocide, psychologically, emotionally. Churchill's father was the Governor General of India in 1835. He said, I want to take Burma and give it to the crown jewel bitch in London. And what did he do? He went in and he captured an autonomous, sovereign, indigenous nation that had been living for 4,000 years without the white man's fucking crazy religion and ethics. 135 years, 2 wars, and I looked at the British Museum of Burma. You would not believe the forms of torture of that culture. Rangoon, Mandalay, decimated by Allied soldiers trying to Japanese out the Japanese fascists, but the Burmese traumatized beyond belief. Dictatorship, I think, was the result of the backlash of this brutal democracy, this imperialistic democracy that oppressed their own people. Ask a First Nations person in America, in Canada, in Australia, how they feel about the white, the religious, the educated, the politics. Don't give me repatriations. Get out of the fucking country, man. We don't want your imperialism in Hawaii. Get out of it. Abandon your hierarchy, right? Yeah, I lose it a little bit. I'm able to say that now that I'm dying. And Burma is so amazing as a culture. 135 languages, 27 different ethnicities, longtime Buddhist, Jews, atheists, Muslims, coexisting in struggle. And within it all, we had the woman, not just Aung San Suu Kyi, that said there's a way beyond patriarchy. There's a way beyond the inculcated experiment of Western democracy as we know it. She was ushering in a radical new form of feminine-inspired democracy that wasn't beholding to Western models particularly. And the world didn't like it because Burma is the Saudi Arabia of South Asia, gold, oil and gas. All of why she was vilified in the Rakhine state with the Rohingya issue was Xi Jinping's need to keep the oil flow going from the Bay of Bengal, a 1,200-mile pipeline from that Bay of Bengal right through the Rohingya, Rakhine state, right to Yunnan province. I've been there numerous times. And because she wasn't going to play ball like we do with Saudi Arabia, okay, they said, let's throw her under the bus, orchestrate a design where she looks like she's fallen from grace because she's the ethical queen, and the propaganda machine of the New York Times and CNN and BBC, blah, 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 blah. No offense to any of you. Corporate media sucks. And this is a friendship. This is family. Many people have died based upon this propaganda. And Burma, my home, has been it's under a genocide right now. No one's paying attention. I've lost 90% of my donor base in the last 4 years for what I just said. 2,000 pages of deeply researched books that put it out in immeasurable detail that no one would even report on, much less review, like Robert Kennedy's book, The Real Anthony Fauci. No offense. I just happened to read it. I'm not saying I'm taking sides, although I do feel. But I read, you've got to see yourself through the eyes of the enemy. There's no hope as an activist until you do that, to maintain some civility of heart. Otherwise, it's reactionary. And so I would only recommend, when you hate someone, study how they think about you. Ask them intimate questions. Please explain to me how I've failed in your mind. The kind of thing. How beautiful it would be if all of us around the world would just yell to Mr. Putin and the president of Ukraine, let's talk about our differences. No, the weapons aren't coming. Do everything to stand vigil. Where's our Rosa Parks moment in that country? Ideal, 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 ideal. Yeah. Otherwise, there's no future. So I was thrown out of Burma. I've gone back numerous times. And Burma is not just my spiritual home. I stopped teaching. But I finally realized by going to war zones that there's a higher truth than your freedom. It's a freedom of responsibility to support the freedom of others, equal if not more than your own. Ubuntu. And so your perfection to hide your imperfections was just your inability to have an intimate friendship, a love affair that included your foibles as strengths. I know that's cliched, but the patriarchal model that's infused all religions, philosophies, and psychologies very much demonizes the human condition in the name of God, truth, and enlightenment. And so until you see these things, it's very easy to be a running dog for propaganda, idealism, and bullshit. And it's rampant in not just the New Age circuit, but in the well-heeled, avant-garde Western Buddhist scene, the tradition that I come from. And so that's my answer about why Burma. But along those lines, I'm a believer that, who was it asking me today? Oh, in our conversation with Bodhi, just this thing having this condition where I'm told that I could die any second, literally. What it's doing for me, it's really motivating more. Not that I've lived in the box, but I hear people talk about their condition, and they're not able to see the recognition of their own complicity with a form of middle class to upper middle class slavery called lockstep with their cultural capitalism. And it's like, I just came from Vancouver. No offense to Vancouver, New York, Philadelphia, but it's horrifying to me to see the absence of nature. I've been walking naked down here at Deer Park behind Baby Beach on, dosing 5 days a week for the last year. I've never known the power of luminosity of natural D3. I've been on Maui too long, or not enough, right? And it's not just about health. I've cried more tears in that forest, hanging out with the doves and the monkeys and hearing the children laugh at the beach, by just simply realizing I've relaxed the need to perform in a cultural stage where you'll never be complete. I don't know what I'm saying exactly, but there's something about where you live on this island that's not found in a home alone. A moratorium on tourism, a moratorium on homes, a moratorium on hotels and buses. I just saw my little spiel for Tom's refurbished, renovated, Renaissance sugar mill to talk in the 17,000 square feet temple that he has anointed with his art, but more than that, his heart. He's basically said we can make life out of that which has been abandoned. That's a model of success. You, as residents of this island, me as a temporary guest, radicalize this radical special island and say no to everything that's wrong and yes to everything that's right. That's what Summer's bringing up. There's time to turn it around. Tom's testament to this incredible piece of art that's not seen or felt except experience on a visceral level. Yes, there's sculptures there. Yes, there's beautiful, but it's a felt experience of transformation and Renaissance in action. I've met people there who've taken trash into iconic pieces of life. And you know these people on this island, transforming this island. But if Mr. Bezos is listening, or anyone who's affluent and anyone who's in denial, all the big hotels, not just go green, totally showcase this island as a livable spectacle of hope in the great cauldron of denial that we're all a part of, right? This is why I love Reverend Bodhi B in our book, Facing Death. It's not about death alone, the resurrection of inspiration. So anyway, thank you for that.
Can I dovetail off of this transition energetic role I have with audience? Apologies, and also following your lead. Again, if anybody wants actionable steps to create places of safe haven, places of respite for the unsheltered or other folks that are rooted in indigenous ways of healing,
I think Summer is saying on a heart level, and I really ask of you not to change your opinions about Burma or her, but to feel new possibilities, that what's been presented in the media is inaccurate. It's absolute 100% propaganda. I've studied it in detail. But when I first met her in 1995, after her first release, she's really a remarkable human being. Am I fond of her? Yes. But I'm fond of many of the people I've met through her. She's irreverent, she's self-deprecating, super smart, radically attractive, measured. The biggest thing about her is that she asks questions about you. I had to say, no, you're the Nobel laureate, I'm just the journalist. But I'm curious about your time as a blah, 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 blah. So that's really interesting to see these characters in people who are celebrities of heart. But I asked her when we first met, because every meeting was graded with the possibility of being jailed or deported. And I said, you call your revolution a revolution of the spirit, a nonviolent revolution for democracy and the elevation of global human rights. And I said, what in essence do you mean by that? And she said, Alan, you were out, this is paraphrasing, you were out on the street where myself and my two colleagues, Utinu and Uchimong, just gave a presentation, which we do on the weekends. And there may have been, what, 2,000 or 3,000 people there. You may or may not know that everyone there is defying state law by gathering in groups more than 5, where it is mandatory 5 years imprisonment when you're caught, no trial, often tortured for that action. You asked me about a revolution of the spirit. To come out of your home with that level of risk takes what? Courage, right? So the essence of this revolution is courage. And she said, the courage to care about things larger than your own self-interest. And that stayed with me so long. Not to be compassionate per se, but to empower that my life is more important than just my needs, my responsibility to family and self. It's about caring for things larger than my own self-interest. And she said that many people, unfortunately, think of this revolution as a revolution of being fearless. No, not at all. It's about learning how to act, a very important point, act despite the fear. Act despite the worry. Act despite the hesitancy. Learning to coexist with moral, ethical courage in the face of fear for the betterment of culture, society, family, and self. And then she concluded with, as our teacher, the Venerable Sayadaw U Pandita, my Dhamma teacher in meditation, said, you learn to empower the emotion, hear this please, of learning to quiver in the face of freedom and fear. That's a Burmese word, which I don't know at the moment, where you consciously allow to tremble with uncertainty and keep empowering the mindful, intelligent occupation of moral caring for the betterment of others as the way forward, rather than falling into that perception of hardship, imprisonment, incarceration. Very risky, I imagine. I could only be deported at the time, but I would not have imagined what it would be like to be in a home and the possibility of being imprisoned. And then she said, courage to see the truth of something, feel the truth of what you see, and the ability to act upon what you feel and see. See, feel, act with courage. Learn to quiver. Her final word was, which I leave with you, if enough of us do this, one person at a time, That's all. The person right with you, wherever you are, bringing whatever it is that you value the most to that one encounter. That's our revolution of the spirit, in essence. We spent 5 months talking about this, but in essence, that's it. And from my heart to yours, thank you for taking the time to come out. Thank you for the time to listen. And I have a book with the Reverend Bodhi B that's coming out on the 29th called Facing Death, A Conversation with Reverend Bodhi B. I have a children's book that's coming out soon too. It's in pre-order called Tonight I Met a Deva, An Angel of Love. It's really for adults as well. And from my heart to yours, stay close. If I can be of any help to you, reach out. And Tom, to you, my friend, thank you. And Michelle, thank you, thank you, thank you.
I have a question, Al.
Take your time, please.
Is there anyone in the media or politics that you like, that you listen to?
Is there anyone in the media that I like and listen to? That's a very, I'm quivering with fear. Saying, because I was highly vilified the other day mentioning this journalist. There are a number of people, let me say it this way, to be non-problematic. I listen and read the eyes and the ears and the thoughts of people I disagree with. And much of that process, Tom, has alerted me to my prejudice about my projection of what I would disagree about them until I listened more carefully at them. For example, Steve Bannon. And he has maybe 10 or 15 different, very radical investigative journalists on his program, many of whom I agree with and disagree with in pretty equal proportion. But I've really learned to listen to a lot of people who are allies of Biden, Obama, and Trump to understand the political story in the West. And now I'm no longer as prejudiced as I was prior to the election. So I'll just leave it mild like that. I do not read with any delight a lot of the South Asian correspondence for Burma or South Asia. They are thoroughly hypnotized, and they're those types that do not put themselves in harm's way to listen to the voice of the people and really cross-check, is this true? That kind of thing. And we in our books, these 4 books on Burma specifically, we dedicated volume 1 exclusively to Aung San Suu Kyi and her words. And almost everything that you've read for 4 years in the New York Times, BBC, and CNN, The Independent, is completely absent of what you find in 560 pages of her words in those books, and contradicts even the most repeated words of her not speaking up. She spoke up so much, did so much in support of the Rohingyas. And people do not get that she's not complicit with the military or the genocide by talking in The Hague in contradiction to genocide, but not in complicity with the military atrocities. It's a different issue. She took a radical position of feminine-inspired non-vilification of the enemy. Mind you, the result of what she's done has led her to prison. Her friends and colleagues tortured and killed and raped. A country decimated because she chose not to take up weapons and kill the goddamn dick. And a lot of our American scapegoating of these people are based upon our own unrecognized tyranny of Islam. Ask an Iraqi, ask an Afghani, I'm Syrian, my grandparents. They came from Syria to this country. Ask those people. In my book, Extinction Xrated, I ask white politicians to go to Yemen and look at a boy and girl so hungry, so starving, that they can't talk and they can't cry based upon weapons given to Saudi Arabia. So I'm not sure where I find resonance, but I do, to answer your question without not really being honest or forthright, is I've learned the high art to look at myself and my issues through the eye of the enemy. Therefore, I listen religiously to speeches of Mr. Trump. I force myself to listen to the teleprompter of Mr. Biden. I force myself to listen to the general director of the CDC. I force myself to listen to Robert Malone and Dr. Anthony Fauci. I force myself to listen to Nancy Pelosi. I force myself, because I want to be informed. And so that's my answer.
Is there someone you'd like to debate?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. I would love, I put it out so many times, I would love to have been in the Oval Office. I've written about my dialogues with Donald Trump. I wish I could get a high dose of DMT in his mouth, in his nose. I wish I could get a high dose of MDMA in his mouth. I wish I could send him to, rehabilitation with divine women who just basically say, dude, your pecker's too small. But your mind and heart are repressed enough to the salvation if you just let yourself drop the persona and just cry a little bit on Maui for a couple of hours. I would love to be in an office with Joseph Biden and talk, hey, dude, come down from the pedestal of your, compromised brain. There's another way to keep this story alive. Empower these things. What would I do? I would bring in women there and shut the fuck up, Alan. But these people, Tom, and no offense, they need high dose of psychedelics. We don't need any more people using psychedelics, but these politicians need it. They need to come down to their metaphorical needs and open their heart, and the only way is high dose, repeated dose, feminine-inspired salvation through ayahuasca use, DMT, acid, you name it, and dancing naked with the celebrity of the dolphins on this island for a longer period than a weekend trip to the Wailea. Very simple remedies, and if everything else fails, force them to go to Syria, to a refugee camp, and see what American bombs do to human life, and then talk to me. That kind of thing. So yeah, there's lots of things I'd like to do, and if you want me to say this to you in person, invite me to the Oval Office. I would love to be what Greta Thunberg has said to the United Nations. I've written a whole riff about it. That's the digital media today. Speak up, go viral. So yes, I think if enough people said the things that I'm saying, and there are many people that say it far better than I do, but I would love to be in debate and dialogue with these men and women who are called elected politicians in office. And I'll close with this. It's a brilliant question. When I got involved in Burma's struggle for freedom, Aung San Suu Kyi, U Tinu, U Chi Mung, U Win Tin, all of them told me, and my teacher said, Tom, when you talk, Alan, you bring that person that you might vilify into the room with you, and you imagine that person to be you or your wife, your husband, yourself. And you say things to that person that would inspire them to get to their knees of conscience and possibly transform. And if you can't do that, Alan, do not come to our rescue. Do not support us. So my debate isn't so much to debate, do I have the moral courage to rise to the occasion, to put myself into Mr. Putin's mind and body? That's what I mean about the divine feminine. Radical willingness to enter a dialogue with the inexplicable that seems to be so violent and other and odorous. Find innovative ways rather than just flipping the finger at these people. That too. But that we've got to restore freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, and God forbid, just ordinary human inquiry and dialogue. That to me would be the new religion on this planet. So thank you for the question. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for dealing with me. God willing. Namaste.